Paths, Lesson 16, Consequences, What Might Happen Next with Miss Love. Objectives. I can begin to understand the concept of consequences. I can learn to use consequential thinking in order to better solve problems. Schedule. First journal, next lesson, last exit ticket. Our journal for this lesson is, do you think consequences are good or bad? And I want you to explain. So whatever your answer is, if you think they're good or bad, explain why you think that. As usual, you will see a screen on the next slide, and once that bar turns completely red, our time for journal is up and we will move on with the lesson. I know you guys came up with some really great journal responses, but to follow up your journal responses, we're going to talk about consequences. So consequences can be both negative and positive. They can be one or the other. Sometimes a combination of the two, but in most cases, they're negative or positive. And they depend on your behavior. So how you behave causes the direct follow-up of a consequence. Most things we do in life have consequences. Thus, they can either be good or bad. That is why it is important to think about what the consequences of a behavior will be before you engage in the behavior. This is called consequential thinking, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about and get into later on in this lesson. Step 6 in the problem solving plan is think about the consequences. And it's there for a reason. It's very important for us to think about the consequences of what we do, specifically before we do the thing, so that we can decide if it's worth doing or not. Because if we think about a consequence and realize that it's a negative consequence and we don't want that, then we'll know not to engage in whatever we were about to engage into, and vice versa. If we think about the consequence and feel that it's a positive consequence, we know that that's the behavior we want to engage in. So that's kind of what we're going to explore throughout this lesson. So we're going to watch 2 videos on consequences. We're going to watch these 2 videos on consequences and discuss afterwards. The videos will display 2 different types of consequences. So we're going to discuss each video after it comes up. The first video is about a basketball player named J.R. Smith, and he does something and it elicits a consequence, and we're going to talk about what happened in the video after we watch it. So enjoy.
18 and long.
But you have to make them cough it up, Fred. They're not going to just give it up for just giving it up. Cavs have to make this happen.
Yeah, no doubt. J.R. Smith trying to go behind the back and turned it over. Then a foul and a technical foul. So Not the way the Cavs wanted to start this third quarter.
Well, getting frustrated because they're not playing well. I mean, you can't blame it on the referees. You're not playing well. That's all it is. I mean, you have to play better. That's all.
Yeah, that was frustration. JR obviously reached across and foul after he coughed it up. So Garrett Temple will shoot the tech. And Temple missed it.
So what did you see? What happened? What happened in that J.R. Smith video? What behavior led to a consequence? What was the consequence? So in this video, the consequence was negative. There was a technical foul called on J.R. Smith because there was a foul called on J.R. Smith that he did not agree with, and he behaved poorly in response to that foul being called on him. So he got a technical foul as a result of it. So his poor behavior led to his team getting a technical foul. And his behavior led to that consequence. So we're now going to watch a video about Denzel Washington. And you don't necessarily see the behavior that caused this consequence, but we're going to talk about that afterwards.
I'm particularly proud and happy about the young filmmakers, actors, singers, writers, producers that are coming up behind my generation. In particular, Barry Jenkins. Young people understand this young man made 10, 15, 20 short films before he got the opportunity to make Moonlight. So never give up. Without commitment, you'll never start. But more importantly, without consistency, you'll never finish. It's not easy. If it was easy, there'd be no Kerry Washington. If it was easy, there'd be no Taraji Henson, P. Henson. If it were easy, there'd be no Octavia Spencer. But not only that, if it were easy, there'd be no Viola Davis. If it were easy, there'd be no Michael T. Williamson, no Stephen McKinley Henderson, no Russell Hornsby. If it were easy, there'd be no Denzel Washington. So keep working, keep striving, never give up, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. So keep moving, keep growing, keep learning. See you at work.
So, if you couldn't figure it out in the video, Denzel Washington was winning an award for a part he portrayed in a movie. And so I would say that this consequence was a positive consequence. He got an award for essentially working hard. So the behavior that caused this consequence was him working hard and diligently to play this role well. So he had to rehearse, he had to memorize lines, he had to be a good person because he had to work with other people, but all of those things led to the positive consequence of him winning an award. And this one contrasts from the J.R. Smith video because there was a positive consequence in play. But the thing that remained the same in both of the videos was that the behavior dictated the consequence. They both behaved, right? And they both ended with a consequence. Now, what those things look like, what the behavior looks like, will dictate what the consequence looks like. So you see in one video, there was a negative consequence. In the other video, there was a positive consequence because those two behaviors were different throughout those two videos. And that's the thing that I want you to pick up on, that what you do will ultimately dictate what happens afterwards. Going back to the title of this lesson, what happens next? And we have to constantly think about that to pattern the way that we behave in the world. The last part of this lesson, which I hope will tie everything together, is the process of consequential thinking. It's what I wanted you to build up to, right? So you had to learn what a consequence was, what triggers a consequence in order to get to consequential thinking. So, these are some questions to bring about consequential thinking. The first one is, how would people feel? Would it hurt me or anyone else? So when you're asking these questions, you're thinking about the behavior that you want to elicit, right? You're thinking about the thing that you want to do when you're asking these questions. So these will help you decide if it's a behavior that you want to partake in or not. So again, how would people feel? Would it hurt me or anyone else? Another question is, would the solution help me reach my goal? Next, would I want this to happen? And finally, can I find a better solution? So if all those answers get you to where you think you can go ahead with that behavior, great. If not, you'll just rework it, right? That's a part of the process. And then finally, if you're using these questions when you are trying to resolve something, you are a consequential thinker. So what does this mean for you? What are the takeaways? One, most of the things we do have consequences. Number two, it is important to think about those consequences before you do many things in life. You have to be a consequential thinker. And finally, always, always, always take a minute to think about what happens next. And finally, our exit ticket for this lesson. I want you to tell me about a time you received a positive consequence. Tell me what the behavior of consequence was and what the consequence itself was. Okay, you're going to do this on our Google Classroom page. You're going to find the assignment that is labeled with the same lesson name, okay? And then you're going to give that response there. I look forward to hearing from you.